originating from the podcast studio inside FAM 360's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. This is the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. The Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast is designed to encourage, equip, and inspire our audience through a combination of inspirational stories and real-life experiences shared by other successful and skilled leaders in a variety of vocations. We hope that the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast empowers each one of us to step out, step up, and ultimately thrive as leaders. Now here's our host, Mr. Matt Maloney.
Hello, and Happy New Year. Welcome back to another episode of the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Matt Maloney. Wow, it is hard to believe that we are at the end of our first full season here at the Above and Beyond Leadership Podcast. It has been a privilege for me to be able to talk with so many incredible guests that we've got to share and receive wisdom from. I thought it would be great to take an episode and look back at some of the highlights of this past season or year. We had an opportunity to speak with the CEO and leader of a ministry organization called Promise 686 and Andy Cook. Take a listen in on some of the wisdom that he shared on these episodes. What do you think is lacking in leadership today, just generally speaking?
I laugh because my answer to that is so much a part of what probably is lacking in me, and I want to see more in me, right? Or it's built around a strength I have, and therefore, I assume that other people should bring it to the table. So I caveat that I don't know how warped my answer will be, but it's simple. It's follow through. I think I know so many consultants who I wish they would do something with all their words, and it just drives me crazy. I don't care how pretty you can say it. I care if you can make it.
Yep.
And that builder piece is something that we need in our country, frankly, right? I mean, you could carry that out in lots of ways when it comes into manufacturing and other spots.
Yeah.
But I don't want a team of consultants. I don't want a nation of consultants.
Yeah.
I don't want a family of consultants. I don't want to be a father as a consultant. I want to be someone who is an operator and who can deliver something on behalf of others or for others. So that's the piece that I struggle with when I meet people. It's so important that you empower people with enough power that they can abuse it a little bit.
Yeah,
and I don't want them to abuse it. I hope they won't. I hope the values of our organization will make it into them in such a way that they won't. But you got to give them just enough for it to be more than enough. And that gives them that sense of autonomy and inspiration. And people do so much more when you give them that room to fail.
Tell me a moment, or maybe just overall, just one thing that you're most proud of in your life, your personal life.
It's seeing a child move from death to life. And I've seen it in multiple children where I met them frozen, deeply saddened, and seeing what could happen next, even when it was hard to believe there could be a next. One child in particular sat across the table from us as we pondered what the best future would look like for him. It was an amazing scenario where 4 churches came together to figure out how to help a family of 5 children whose mother had just passed away, whose father was out of the picture. And a handful of families had stepped up, and we were the only ones that had the capacity or belief. I'm not sure we had the capacity, but the belief that we could take all 5 of the children. And this 2-year-old sat, frozen in the lap of the woman who'd cared so well for him. And he was so hurt by the loss of his mom and so confused by where he was and this sense of being in transition that, of course, he had no words for. And when he then sometime later came into our house, he was the sort of child who didn't cry. And the most haunting image in the world of what's kind of called internationally orphan care, we refer to something like it as foster care in America, but internationally the word orphan is used more. The most haunting image is that of Eastern European orphanages where there's no sound, where people have stopped, where children have stopped crying because they learned nobody's coming. And that picture played out in my home for the first 3 to 6 months with this little one. He just didn't have a voice, no reason to have a voice. He is so in your face now. He is so alive. He is so free.
Gosh,
there's freedom in him, in his smile, in his aggressiveness. When he joined our family, a biological sibling of his is about 3 weeks difference in age, and that bio child used to dominate the newest member of our family, and that is totally different now. It works as brothers should. They're messing with each other constantly, but he is alive, and there's a passion, and there's a sense that his voice matters to his parents because he's been picked up and held and loved, and that, that's an accomplishment in my life.
That is the ultimate accomplishment.
I've been a part of. I can't say I did all that work, but I've said yes a few times along the way and tried to do it.
I got an opportunity to sit down with one of my friends and a great leader, someone who's dedicated his career to help fundraising and lead nonprofit organizations, Mr. John Flores. What do you think is lacking? What do you feel that is lacking in leadership today that could help be transformative, for people that are leading others into the future, particularly in the workplace?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And you're right. Leadership, even when you hear that word, right, you think of the 60,000 books, the speakers, the topics, the podcasts. I mean, it's never ending.
That's right.
And there's a lot of, you can know it, but can you do it? Right. And I think that's where our cultures really become flawed a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've worked with leaders where they knew leadership. Right. Yep. They read the books, they had an MBA, right? But that's in a vacuum.
It's in a vacuum.
And it's not in the real world.
No.
Right. The real world is when you've got an employee who's a cancer.
Yeah.
The real world is when you've got a global pandemic.
Yep.
When you've got a recession or an economic crisis. Like, what do you do?
Yep.
When you've got moral failures in your office, how do you lead? So I think that what is really lacking in society today, one is getting it out of head knowledge to application. But even layering that is humility, right? And I think what's interesting is when you really look at all of the leadership topics and speakers and those types of things that are out there, there seems to be a lack of a message of it's okay to not be okay as a leader. It's okay to not be perfectly buttoned up as a leader, which again goes back to what we've talked about.
Yep.
It's okay to say, I have no stinking idea what the answer is. Well, and when everybody's looking at you as a leader going, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. Another thing I'll add too is it's a phrase that I learned from my dad is stack the chairs. So I've watched my dad in multiple positions of leadership for 38 years. And one of the things I've always loved about him is if he's ever at an event, and when he was in the political world for 10 years, he had all these public events.
Yeah.
And inevitably at the end of the night, the people in the audience or the volunteers were stacking the chairs in the back of the room, right? It might've been at a civic center or whatever it might be. They got to flip the room for the next day. And without fail, my dad was in the back stacking chairs. And so when I think about humility, right, that's humility in action, is literally and figuratively being willing to not finish your talk or finish your presentation or walk the halls, whatever it is, but it's stacking the chairs, it's taking out the trash, right? And I think that's something that's really lacking a lot too, is the willingness to do the things that maybe you did 20 years ago.
Yeah, right.
Maybe you did when you started the organization, when you had to do everything.
Yep.
But never losing that.
That's right.
I think is rare. And I think that's a differentiator among leaders too.
We're going to take a listen into someone whom I've actually known for about 30 years of my life, someone that I actually went to high school with, and someone who through his journey has become a leader inside the church and outside and runs an organization called the 1010 Project, Mr. Tyler Reagan.
Like when I speak at churches or organizations, one of the first things I'll do is quote John Maxwell that says leadership is influence. And then I'll just say, so raise your hand if you have influence with one other person. And if you don't raise your hand, that's an issue. We got to figure that out. But how you steward your influence, whether it's for 2 people or 200 people, that's your leadership. So it doesn't, I think what has happened is we've coupled leadership with upfront leadership. And that's not the truth. Like the truth is each of us have a leadership responsibility.
Without a doubt.
The lady the receptionist that let me in, she has a responsibility of influence That's her leadership responsibility.
You got
How
it.
she talked to the people on the phone, how she let me in, how she serves, this company in the way she does.
Yeah.
And she did a phenomenal job. And I love seeing that. I remember,
Yeah.
I think it was, anyway, we can go down too many rabbit trails. I get distracted easily if you don't know that. So even as I think about life-giving leadership, one of the things I say in there is that when life flows, influence grows. So whether that's with one person or 20 people, you choosing to bring life to those that you're influencing, that's the simplest way I know to create leadership.
Yeah.
When I talk about integrity, I always talk about integrity in the sense of consistency. I've worked for a lot of leaders that have a work personality and a home personality.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of that. I think that's a lack of integrity.
Right.
So when we talk about
By definition, it really is. If you look at
That's
part
right.
of it, that's right.
when you talk about the integrity of a bridge,
Yeah.
you want to know that it's going to do exactly what it's supposed to do from beginning to end.
You got it.
And the same thing with leaders is I want to know who they are. They're going to have bad days. You're going to have mistakes.
Yep.
But if I can trust who you are because your integrity is intact, you're consistent,
Yeah.
then I'm able to lead you. I'm able to be led by you. I'm able to be a part of an organization. And a lot of leaders are okay with that discrepancy. And I'm just not.
Yep.
And so my prayer has always been that the guy that's sitting here with you right now is the guy that's sitting with my friends at dinner last night, is the guy that plays golf with whoever. I just want to be that guy.
Yeah.
And the other piece is that my boys have a model. I pray that they have a role model that they're proud to be a part of, or to be
Huge.
in family with.
Yeah. Check out where we got to sit down with this girl boss, Miss Lauren Lefevre.
I love to post quotes every day. Like my mind is always full of quotes. I love saving quotes. I don't have one specific one, but the words that I really try to live by, I would say if I was to create a mantra, it would include these things. It would be the power of hard work. I truly believe that anything is possible if you work hard enough. And that's something I want to instill in my kids. The importance of kindness, treating people. Like my mom's really instilled that to me, to be kind to literally everyone, from the person at the fast food line, person at the bank, to your friends, like to treat people the way you'd want to be treated. It goes a long way. It always comes back around.
No doubt.
Loyalty. And I would say also the power of hope. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
I actually I just relaunched this necklace I designed called the Hope Necklace on Lauren Lilly today. But the word hope is important, not in a personal sense with my faith, but also I think when times get hard in business, of believing that a better time's ahead, and if you trudge through, there is always light at the end of the tunnel, even when you don't feel it.
That's
and
right.
To be able to speak that to people around you and to yourself when you don't believe it.
This next episode is incredibly inspiring. How Jacqueline Moore and her husband, Ben, were looking for a summer project for their daughter, Jordan, who has autism, and how the summer t-shirt project exploded into this movement of being kind to everyone.
I want to use our platform for people, for businesses, for whoever to
Yeah.
look and say, wow, I never would have thought someone could do that. And so I show Jordan using accommodations in our business all the time, how we break down skills so that way a teacher can see it, a business owner could see it.
No
and they're
doubt.
like, well, wait, we could have someone do this in our business. I share Jordan's social experiences on our page. I want the youth today to realize people like Jordan would crave some of these opportunities, because I think there's a lot of teens that would love to be a friend. They don't know how, they don't know what to do. And I want to use our platform as a voice to help them learn how. So like just this week's podcast of ours, I had one of Jordan's teen friends on. We're doing it again next week. I want people to get ideas and realize just exactly the power just any individual has to create change.
Check out these clips from two amazing leaders from the younger generation as they share their journey and their aim to go above and beyond into leadership now and into the future. Shruti Balachandar.
I think in terms of leadership, the most important quality to have is being able to learn from your mistakes, persevering, which we might not all do sometimes, being true to your personality, and being culturally agile, making sure that wherever you go, you are changing your persona based on the people you're talking to. And that you are doing the right thing when you're in that community or that society or that country. Because I feel like when I look at America as a whole, and it's such a melting pot of cultures, we often forget that when we go to different people or talk to different societies or communities, that there are different ways to approach methods based on what historically has happened just like that demographic of that community. And I think being culturally agile is a very strong leadership characteristic to have, because you know when to turn your switch on, turn your switch off, and exactly what to portray out there.
Tiffany Obasahan.
People need community. At some point, you're going to lose accountability of yourself, and you're going to need somebody to uphold you in what you told them you wanted to hold on to, because humans are fickle people. I think that's just, it's in our nature. We are not necessarily made to be constant and consistent. Things change, feelings change, motivations change. So you need to have one person at the very least, or a group of people who is going to hold you accountable to what you said you wanted to do and the morals you said you wanted to live by. So step away from that decision. Lean into community, and ultimately just you have to have a set of ideals and morals that you know you wanted to go by to begin with. Or once you get faced with those difficult decisions, it's going to be hard if you don't have something that you wanted to live by.
Yeah, you got to have that moral compass. Take a listen in on this next episode where we get to hear from global entrepreneur Justin Miller, who started an organization led by his faith in his heart and has been transforming the lives of those individuals affected by AIDS.
There was actually just a quote that I'd heard before, but I was reminded of it last week, and I thought it would be appropriate to share because it struck me when I heard it again. It says, the place that God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet.
Oh,
the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And that's by Frederick Buechner.
Yeah.
He's a pastor. And for me, and this is an invitation for folks who would even say, I'm not interested in things of faith, is to say that the life that you may be looking for is at the intersection of the things that are inside of you that you've maybe not even looked at or examined, that God has put in you that you are passionate about, that is part of your purpose. And I think as people are wondering where, what their vocation is or what their call is, I think that's the secret.
We get to take a closer look at someone who's essentially been a serial entrepreneur, Mr. Alex Gu.
I think when you boil down leadership, it really kind of does come down to that. I mean, you can be a good leader and have crappy character. They're out there, but it's a flash in the pan.
I think you could be a successful entrepreneur and have crappy character. I don't know. I may beg to differ. I don't know if you could be a great leader and have crappy character. It's certainly from an integrity perspective.
For sure. And probably caveat that by saying people will can follow a crappy leader.
True.
That's all. That's true.
Yeah, right.
And he or she can get some things done, but it does all. I mean, the character piece is ultimately what, the differentiator, in my opinion.
Listen in as we get to learn from Shaunti Feldhahn, teaching leadership, life skills, and principles to men and women across the globe.
In some ways, you may have touched on this, but I'd like to bring it back. So what is the number one fact couples need to know if they want to decrease the tension around money issues in their marriage inside the house? What's that number one fact that they really need to know?
Well, the main thing is keep in mind constantly when you're having that tension, it's not about that money stuff, right? It's not the money itself. It's all this stuff underneath it. And so there's a very real need when you're in the middle of it to stop and go, wait, let me just think about, it's not about what I think it is, what's going on under the surface. Because if you address that, then suddenly things start working. And then probably the number one tactical thing that people need to know how to do in order to do that is people have to be able to talk about money. And just recognizing, again, you're not talking about the money, you're talking about that underground stuff.
Next up, I'd like to take a sneak peek at some of our solo sessions that we did throughout the year to share with our audience some of the things we talked about on those episodes.
Every great leader has to have a period in life in which they are just torn down and they go through some intense struggle
It allows them to gain perspective so that they can come back and lead themselves and ultimately lead others with conviction and with confidence, and certainly with humility. If we're going to have, as leaders, effective self-regulation and self-management, we need to take care of ourselves emotionally. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to take time to allow ourselves to step back. Some people call it, stepping out and seeing the forest through the trees. Self-care is an absolute must if we're going to have good self-regulation and self-management. I know when I approach a particular situation with a refreshed or positive mindset, I typically come out the other side with a positive outcome. Not necessarily always, but I certainly approach the situation from a position and a posture that's lent towards more positivity. And therefore, when I'm struggling or going through the struggle of the situation, I tend to have a better, perspective or outlook on it. So let me close with this quote here. It's a quote from Joseph Fort Newton. We cannot tell what may happen to us in the strange medley of life, but we can decide what happens to us, how we can take it, what we can do with it, and that is what really counts. Well, that's it, guys. As we wrap up, thanks again for joining, and to all of our subscribers and listeners out in podcast land, I hope today's episode was both empowering and inspirational. Until the next time, I hope and pray that our daily journeys are filled with opportunity to lift others up as we aim to go above and beyond. Thanks, everyone.
Our executive producer and host is Matt Maloney, President and CEO of FAM360. Strategic Communication Coordinator, Michelle Ducato. Production assistance by Tin Dog Studios. Director, John Roland. Creative Assistant, Whitney Roland. Theme song, Connecting Dots by Curtis Cole, provided by Artlist. Please subscribe today and don't miss any of our weekly episodes.